Hello and welcome to the I&D podcast, brought to you by myself, Dennis Dunicic. Now, before we begin today, I want to remind all of my viewers to subscribe to our channel. This is so you can stay in the loop on the international and global affairs that are affecting us all today. We're going to get right into our main story today, which is a general update of the coronavirus situation in the United States and how it's affecting its neighbors, trade partners, and its own citizens. Now, some of you may think that this is a domestic issue, that it doesn't fundamentally affect the international community. However, it is affecting America's economy and its political stability. And as the saying goes, when America coughs, the world catches a cold. So it is important to keep track of U.S. domestic issues. The first thing we're going to focus on is travel restrictions, or more accurately, the lifting of current travel restrictions that have been in place since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, in terms of travel to the United States as a foreign national, getting into the US has been significantly easier since the COVID pandemic and since the restrictions that have been introduced via air travel than land travel. Getting through a land border into the United States has been significantly more difficult. In fact, it's completely impossible unless the entity that is coming in is deemed to be essential. Now, what this means is that for the past 19 months, so the early days of the virus, 19 months is about a year and a half plus 1 month, the only entities, so I'm talking about vehicles, trains on railways, and boats through sea borders, that also counts as a land border, that have been able to enter the borders of the United States are those that have been deemed essential. Primarily, this has been trade. So things such as truck drivers, cargo ships, etc., that are providing goods, bringing in goods into the United States economy, or taking them out to trade partners. That has been the only way one can get into the United States, through a land border. In terms of air travel, the United States has adopted a policy of deeming specific countries to be in either a red or a green zone. What that means is if a country, let's say Spain, for example, has a major coronavirus outbreak at the time, travel from Spain to the United States is restricted. Spanish flyers would not be allowed into the United States. But if a country like the UK is having a relatively good corona situation, UK people could come into the United States for whatever reason they deem necessary and would not be blocked off simply because they don't have some kind of coronavirus proof or evidence. They just needed a negative test to get through the borders. Now, this is fundamentally changing. In terms of land travel, everyone is going to be allowed into the United States with a legitimate reason. So not just including essential reasons, but let's say you want to visit the United States. You're a tourist, or you're going for leisure reasons, or maybe you're just visiting your family and you're a foreign national. You are now allowed to cross a US border without having to have an essential reason. However, what is going to be required is a COVID vaccination. Everyone entering the United States has to be fully vaccinated in order to pass the borders. And this is also going to be true for air travel. Now, these new regulations are going to be introduced next month. In the early days, they have not stated specifically what date this new policy is going to begin taking effect in, but it's going to be around the early days of November. Anyone who has a legitimate reason to come to the United States is going to be allowed in as long as they are fully vaccinated. But one interesting thing should be added. On the land borders, when you're coming into the United States, or if a foreign national is going into the United States, the process is going to look like this. They're going to be asked by a border control agent if they are vaccinated. And there's two answers, yes or no. Most people are going to say yes. The border control agents are not necessarily actually going to check if you are vaccinated. It's heavily up to officer discretion to send you to a secondary checkpoint to actually see if you are vaccinated. So it's completely up to what the officer determines based on someone's answer if they are vaccinated or not, if they are allowed into the United States. Now, this is coming after months of pressure by Mexico and Canada, who are the United States neighbors and the largest trading partners in the region to lift these restrictions to allow their people to travel to the United States. Keep in mind, many Canadians, many Mexicans, and many Americans have families that cross borders and don't all necessarily have the same citizenship. So one issue that has existed is the only way that people living in Mexico or Canada were able to visit their family is to actually get on a plane and provide either proof of vaccination or a negative PCR test. They would not have been able to simply drive into the US, even if they live right on the border, which is pretty fucking absurd if you want to visit your abuela and you have to drive to Mexico City to get on a plane and fly all the way there. That is no longer going to be the case next month. So families will be able to be reunited. And what this means for the American economy is it's going to bring back a lot of tourism, which is good. It's good for a lot of small businesses. It's good for big businesses. It's good for business in general. So now, generally speaking, in terms of allowing foreign nationals into the United States, border control is going to look at it as a case-by-case basis. They're going to look at every individual as a different person and see if they are vaccinated or not. There's not going to be large regulations that determine who can and can't come in based on their country of origin. It's going to be, do you have proof of vaccination? And that's going to be the key determining factor whether or not a foreign national is allowed into the United States. Now, it should be noted that this does not apply to illegal immigrants. Illegal immigrants that have been attempting to enter the United States since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic have been immediately turned away without even being given the ability to be processed dually or seek asylum under what is called Title 42. Now, Title 42 is a very interesting tool in border control law, and it was instituted by Donald Trump, but it has been carried on by the Joe Biden administration. What Title 42 says is that when any immigrant, legal or otherwise, but in the current situation right now, it has primarily been used for illegal immigrants, can be turned away without even being allowed into a processing facility to explain why they're coming to the United States, and simply brought back to their home country. Just, no, you're not allowed to get in. Legally, this is called an immediate expulsion. So these new lifting of restrictions are not going to apply to illegal immigrants. That is something that is important to be noted. Now that we've kind of covered the travel restrictions, which are the international aspect of the story, let's focus on the domestic aspect of this story. The Biden administration has been grappling with a widespread of COVID misinformation or simply people that don't want to get vaccinated. And they have constantly been debating on how to get the withholders, the people who have been avoiding getting vaccinated, to finally take the shot. This is about 100 million Americans. Almost 1/3 of the population refuses to get or has not yet gotten a COVID-19 vaccine shot. And the Biden administration is beginning to introduce new measures to kind of push people towards this, introducing COVID passes to make things like going to restaurants or nightclubs more difficult. But what's most notable is the United States Department of Labor is deliberating on and has already drafted an emergency regulation, an emergency law to state that any employer, any company that employs more than 100 employees is going to be required to have every single employee be vaccinated, and if they are not vaccinated, to be tested on a weekly basis. And this has been a major source of controversy and concern. And I'm actually going to give my opinion on this. Forcing people to get vaccinated is not the way that you do it. The reason individuals are not getting vaccinated, primarily, some people just don't want to, or they're too lazy, they don't feel like it, or they have no need for it. That's a small amount of the population. A significant amount of people genuinely believe that there is something else having to do with the vaccine, or they believe in some form of conspiracy theory, or that the vaccine is simply being used to, in the most extreme cases, track people with microchips based on Bill Gates. And that, I'll say, is not true. If Bill Gates wants to track you with a microchip, he's going to do it through your phone. We all carry microchips around with us today already. It's not going to be through a vaccine shot. And other people simply feel that the shot is not safe. And for legitimate reasons. Most vaccines for any disease take anywhere between 4 to 10 years to test, process, and approve for human consumption or human use. COVID-19 vaccines, the vast majority of which have been processed in less than a year, tested and approved and put on the market. A lot of people are obviously and logically concerned about this and skeptical about this. Now, it's probably good that the vast majority of people do get vaccinated, but the process as a governing body to get people vaccinated should be information campaigns, promotional campaigns, the process of force. And sure, technically, the US government is not forcing anyone to get vaccinated. One, there's a caveat where the employers can allow their employees to get tested once a week. And two, it's not the government that's telling the employer they have to make sure they're vaccinated. They can choose not to, they'll face heavy fines. So technically it's the employer making the employees get vaccinated. And this is a total cop-out. It's a weak move saying, okay, it's not our responsibility anymore. Let's put it on the companies and the employers, which is really bullshit. And finally, when you try and force people to take something they don't want to take, conspiracy theories are simply going to rise. If a vaccine is helpful, if it helps save lives, if it's decreasing the pandemic, why do we need to be forced to take it? Is what many conspiracy theorists and generally people who question the entire pandemic are going to say. And I want to clarify, I believe that vaccines, the vast majority of vaccines available on the entire global market, approved by the World Health Organization, especially those approved by the FDA, are absolutely effective and should be taken. Get vaccinated. Get vaccinated. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I also do not believe in pushing people and forcing them to make a choice that might simply be out of their religious beliefs, might simply be because they don't want to. They have their own choice to determine their own personal safety. And sure, getting vaccinated affects others. There's a thing called herd immunity, and we have to increase this herd immunity. But if a government is effective enough and a vaccine is truly as helpful as they state it is, then people will just naturally get vaccinated. Enough people will naturally get vaccinated to avoid the spread of this virus. Now, I don't want to say more in terms of vaccinations, whether or not people should get vaccinated or not. I am not an epidemiologist. I am not a doctor. I am far from a medical expert, but I'm viewing it from a governing perspective. If I was in a position of power and I had to ensure that the vast majority of my population received the vaccine, I would do it through incentive, not disincentive or making being unvaccinated and treating unvaccinated people as second-class citizens. Those are just my 2 cents. Tell me your opinion. Now, this is a really heated topic, and I want to ask anyone that is going to comment in the comment sections to be polite and constructive. Unfortunately, coronavirus, vaccines, masks, everything related to it has become more divisive than abortion or religious rights or some of the most divisive issues that exist today. Coronavirus has kind of taken the cake. Be respectful. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and let's have a clean, respectable debate. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Denis Danicic, and I'll see you next time.